The drop pod hit the ground so hard my teeth rattled, and before the hatch even hissed open, something outside was already screaming. I unclipped my harness and rolled out into red mud, rain falling sideways in stinging sheets, and a shape the size of a truck came crashing through the tree line toward me. My name is Daniel, and this was supposed to be the moment I broke. That was the whole point of Deathworld training. The aliens who ran it called themselves the Veltari, and they had a simple method for every new species that joined their coalition. Take the recruits, drop them into a simulated hellscape built from their deepest fears, and watch them crumble. A broken person is easy to command. A broken person says yes to everything. 41 species had gone through this program before humans, and every single one of them came out quiet, grateful, and obedient. I grabbed a broken branch off the ground, spun out of the charging creature's path, and laughed. Actually laughed, out loud, rain running down my face. Because this thing chasing me looked exactly like a mean bull moose, and I grew up on a farm. Somewhere above the storm clouds, in a viewing chamber built into orbit, a Veltari observer named Sel Aren was frowning at a floating screen. I did not know it yet, but Sel had been assigned to monitor my psychological collapse. Instead, she was watching me use a stick to redirect an 1,100-pound predator into a mud bank, and then wave at the sky like I knew she was watching. She did not know I knew. Not yet. The first few days of the sim were supposed to strip away hope. Acid rain that could blister skin in minutes, so we built shelter from stone and bark within hours. Predators bred for the fear centers of 100 different species, and my squad turned it into a competition, keeping score of how many close calls we survived, giving each beast a nickname. A creature with 6 eyes and a taste for anything warm-blooded got called Kevin, because a woman named Freya on my team said he looked like a Kevin, and none of us could explain why that was funny, but we laughed until our ribs hurt while running from something that wanted to eat us. That was the part the Veltari could not process. We were supposed to be terrified. Instead, we were bonding. On the 4th day, the ground opened up and swallowed our shelter whole, dropping us into a cave system flooded with icy water. This was the isolation module, meant to separate each recruit and leave them alone with despair. I found myself wedged in a dark tunnel with a man named Marcus, who I had known for exactly 4 days, and within an hour we were trading stories about our families back home like old friends at a bar. Somewhere in the dark, Freya was singing to keep her own spirits up, off-key and proud of it, and the sound carried through the tunnels until 3 other recruits joined in. The Veltari had built that cave to make us feel alone. They had not counted on humans finding each other in the dark anyway. Sel Aren requested a meeting with the training council after the isolation module failed to produce a single reported case of despair. Her supervisor, a broad-shouldered Veltari named Torvun Keth, waved off her concerns. Every species resists at first, he told her. Give it time. The simulation adjusts. So the simulation adjusted. On the 6th day, the sky itself seemed to catch fire. Storms of lightning arcing between clouds so thick they blotted out the light, and the ground began to shake apart beneath us. This was supposed to be the breaking point, the moment despair became inevitable. My team turned it into a race. We sprinted across collapsing ground, leaping gaps that opened beneath our boots, hauling each other up ledges as the world fell away behind us, and when we finally reached solid stone on the far side, gasping and soaked and alive, somebody started clapping. Then everybody was clapping. A man named Oliver, who had nearly gone down in a crevice moments before, threw his arms up like he had just won a championship game, and the sound of our voices echoed off canyon walls that had just tried to swallow us whole. Sel Aren watched this from orbit with her hand pressed against the screen, and for the first time in her long career monitoring Deathworld trials, she did not know what she was looking at. By the 2nd week, something had shifted inside the observation chamber. Reports were being filed, then contradicted, then filed again. Human recruits were not just surviving, they were requesting harder terrain. A woman named Ellie submitted a formal message through the training relay, asking if the predator population could be increased, because, in her words, things had gotten a little quiet. A man named Ryan built an actual fishing setup out of scavenged wire during a supposed food scarcity crisis, then shared his catch with the entire camp, and started something he called Fish Fridays. Torvun Keth called an emergency council session. The numbers did not make sense. Humans were completing modules meant to take 4 cycles in a fraction of that time, and their morale readings, instead of dropping toward the despair threshold the training was built around, kept climbing. Some readings were now higher than baseline. Something about crisis appeared to make humans happier, not weaker. I did not know any of this was happening above me. All I knew was that on day 11, during what the sim called a resource famine, Our camp threw what Freya insisted on calling a party, using dried meat, foraged berries, and a drink Marcus brewed from something that was definitely not meant to be fermented. We built a fire that lit up half the valley, and somebody started telling jokes about Kevin the six-eyed predator, who by that point had become something like our unofficial camp mascot, spotted from a distance more often than he attacked. That was the night Cell Erin made a decision that would have gotten her removed from her post if it had gone wrong. She opened a private channel down to the surface, disguised as a routine data ping, and sent me a single message. "Why are you not afraid?" I stared at the words glowing faintly on my wrist device for a long moment before I answered. I told her the truth. Humans did not grow up on a peaceful world. Our home had storms, and predators, and food shortages, and disease, long before any of us learned to build anything soft or safe. Every single person down here had grown up dealing with some version of hardship, and what looked to her like a nightmare designed to break us, looked to us like a slightly rough version of an ordinary Tuesday. Struggle was not the opposite of joy for humans. Sometimes it was the exact shape joy took. Cell Erin did not respond that night, but 3 days later, when the Council pushed the difficulty higher than it had ever gone for any species in the program's history, unleashing everything they had into one final trial meant to finally force a collapse, she was the one standing in the observation chamber when it happened. The ground cracked open across the entire valley. Storms converged from every direction at once. Every predator in the simulation was released simultaneously, Kevin included, and for 6 straight hours it looked, from orbit, like the end of the world. We survived it by working together so smoothly it looked rehearsed. Freya and Ryan built barricades while Marcus and Ellie drew the largest predators away, using nothing but noise and nerve. Oliver climbed to the highest point in the valley just to shout warnings down to the rest of us, and I spent that entire night hauling injured teammates to safety, patching wounds with whatever we had, and somehow still cracking jokes to keep everyone's spirits from sinking. When the storm finally broke and the sun came up over a valley that looked like a battlefield, every single one of us was still standing, and instead of collapsing in exhaustion or despair, somebody, I think it was Ellie, started singing the same off-key song Freya had started back in the caves. Within a minute the whole camp had joined in, dirty, bruised, soaked, and grinning like idiots, singing into a sunrise that was supposed to be witnessing our defeat. Cell Erin watched this final moment from the observation chamber with tears in her eyes, though she would later insist it was simply moisture from the humidity controls malfunctioning. Torvin Keth stood beside her in silence for a long time before finally speaking. "We built this training to make them obedient," he said. "We built it to break their spirits so they would follow orders without question." Cell nodded slowly, still watching the screen. "And instead we gave them the best vacation of their lives." That evening, the training program was formally suspended for humans, not because we had failed, but because the Council had no idea what to do with a species that treated their worst simulated nightmare like a group camping trip. Word came down that our cohort would be reclassified, no longer trainees to be broken and reshaped, but specialists, the kind of team you called in specifically because a mission was expected to be difficult. I was standing in the mud that evening, watching the last of the storm clouds clear, when Cell Erin's voice came through my wrist device again. She asked, quite simply, if humans could be trusted to lead the very same kind of training for other species joining the coalition. I looked around at Freya braiding wet hair by the fire, at Ryan showing Oliver how to properly gut a fish, at Marcus already planning what he called version 2 of his terrible drink recipe, and I smiled. I told her we would be honored, and that we already had some ideas to make it more fun. 3 months later, I stood at the edge of a brand new Deathworld simulation, this time built for a nervous species called the Quori, who had never seen a storm in their lives and were shaking at the mere sight of the sky above them. I crouched down beside their lead recruit, a small trembling being named Vask, and offered him a hand up. "Come on," I said. "Let me show you how we do this." Somewhere behind me, Freya was already lighting a fire, and somebody was singing.